Okay, we're going to do a quick recap on very simple composite functions. Okay, so a composite function is one that's composed of more than one separate function. So composed of, meaning that there's more than one multiple functions. Okay, so let's start with an example one. Let's go right into it. So f of x equals 7x minus 2 and g of x equals x squared. So we're going to find f of g of x, and we're going to find g of f of x. So two separate questions there. Okay, so f of g of x, well that's f of, well, g of x is x squared, so that's f of x squared. Okay, what does the f function tell you to do? The f function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you times it by 7, you take away 2. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you times it by 7, you take away 2. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you times it by 7, and you take away 2. Okay, then we're going to try g of f of x. So, g of f of x, well, f of x is 7x minus 2. So I can sub that straight in. F of x equals 7x minus 2. So g of f of x is g of 7x minus 2. What's the g function? The g function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you square it. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, square it. Whatever is in the bracket, you write it down and you square it. Okay, example 2. Example 2, we've got f of x equals x cubed minus 3 and g of x equals x over 3. We're going to find f of g of x, so that's one. Okay, so that's f of, well, g of x is x over 3, so that's f of x over 3. Okay, what does the f function tell us to do? Well, the f function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you cube it, you take away 3. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you cube it, and you take away 3. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you cube it, and you take away 3. Okay, example 3. F of x equals 5x squared minus 1. G of x equals sine of x. We're going to find g of f of x. Well, that's g of, well, f of x is 5x squared minus 1. And what does the g function tell me to do? The g function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down and it's sine of whatever's in the bracket. So whatever's in the bracket is sine of whatever's in the bracket. Whatever's in the bracket, it's sine of whatever is in the bracket. Okay, example 4. Example 4, I've got f of x equals 9x minus 3 and g of x equals 3x. I'm going to find g of f of x. Okay, so that's g of f of x. F of x is 9x minus 3. What's the g function? The g function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you times it by 3. Okay, so the g function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, times it by 3. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, and then you times it by 3. And that's easy enough to expand out, so go ahead and expand that one out. 27x minus 9, example 5. Example 5, f of x equals 4 to the power x, and g of x is equal to x plus 2. We're going to find both f of g of x and g of f of x. Okay, so f of g of x, that's going to be f of, well, g of x is x plus 2, so it's f of x plus 2. What's the f function? The f function is whatever's in the bracket is 4 to the power whatever's in the bracket. Whatever's in the bracket is 4 to the power whatever's in the bracket. Whatever's in the bracket is 4 to the power of whatever is in the bracket. Okay, and then g of f of x, well, that's going to be g of, well, f of x is 4 to the power x. What's the g function? G function is dead easy. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you add on 2. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you add on 2. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down and you add 2. Okay, example 6. A of x equals 9x squared minus 1. B of x equals 3x plus 2. Okay, so part A is we're going to find f of, or rather g of b of 2. The first thing we need to do is to find b of 2. So b of 2, what's the b function? The b function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you treble it and you add 2. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you treble it and you add 2. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you treble it and you add 2. 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8. Okay, so b of 2 is 8. So that's g of b of 2, which is 8, g of 8. Or rather, g of a. Okay, a of 8. What's the a function? The a function is whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you square it, you times it 9, you take away 1. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you square it, you times it 9, take away 1. Whatever's in the bracket, you write it down, you square it, you times it by 9, you take away 1. So that's 9 times 64, take away 1. So 64 times 9, I'll just do it aside. 4 9s are 36, 16 carry 3, 6 9s are 54, plus 3 is 57. 576 take away 1, which is 575, final answer.